So in the spring of 2017, writer David Brooks publishes an article in the New York Times titled, "How to Leave a Mark on People." And in it, he first writes about something called a thick institution. Now, I still remember printing this article out and bringing it to one of Chris and I's weekly meetings. And as soon as we read it, reviewed it with each other, it was clear this is something we want to try and create. You see, Brooks, he says that a thick institution is basically an organization that serves as a launch pad for its members. It engages the whole person, head, hands, heart, and soul, ultimately propelling that person to a greater good. We often see this in the way certain people may speak about the college they went to and the virtues they learned there, especially in places like West Point or Spelman or even right here at the University of Mississippi. We also see this in business tech cultures where certain places have employees that view their vocation more as a way of life rather than a place to just clock in. We think about this with Apple, Facebook, Amazon, places like this. And then among other things, we also see this in athletics. And every once in a while, we'll see a team that has certain virtues embedded in it that it exceeds wins and losses. And Chris and I both had recent experiences with this in Baylor basketball and Duke football. And we started thinking, why don't we try and do this with a high school football program?
So Hunter and I first met in the fall of 2017. I was in my second season as the head football coach at Oxford High School, and Hunter had recently come on board as a professor in the University of Mississippi School of Education. We were connected through a mutual friend, and Hunter reached out via email, and he shared with me the research he had done on some of the common traits he found in the top high school football programs and coaches in the state of Texas. I was instantly intrigued. Hunter and I set up a plan where he would come observe Oxford football for a week during our season. He sat in on everything we did: staff meetings, player meetings, weight room sessions, practices, even rode the bus with us to an away game that week. We met the next week to review notes from what he had observed, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated his honest assessment of our program. There were some things that we were doing well that were affirmed. There were also some areas where we needed to improve. This week turned into weekly meetings where Hunter and I would get together and brainstorm ways to improve our respective programs. At one of these meetings, like Hunter mentioned, he introduced me to the idea of a thick institution. We started to work on how can we make Oxford football become a thick institution. As we dove deeper and deeper into that idea, it became really clear to us that we were on the cusp of something special.
Now, rarely are ideas original, and this one's no different. We built our work off of the research from James Davidson Hunter and Ryan Olson from the University of Virginia regarding their work on thick and thin moral frameworks. And to summarize their findings, a thin institution is one that uses its members, while a thick institution actually values its members and propels them to a higher good. We also heavily relied on Chip and Dan Heath's work on intentional design, that great moments and structures shouldn't be just left to chance, but they should be intentionally designed, crafted, implemented in a way to make sure that they really do happen. So when it was our turn to actually do this stuff, we did not want to have a casual approach to it. And so often that can happen, right? We can go into a room, we write some things down of what we want to see, we give a heartwarming talk, we feel good on the inside, and we leave it alone and nothing really happens. So we weren't going to do that. We wanted to be explicit in how this is going to look and how we're going to operate. Now, as soon as that happened, we actually put together our own framework that we're really proud of. I'm going to walk you through that right now. We continue to put the players and the staff through this each year, but this was incredibly important year one. First thing we did was we always look at the history of the program, and this is so important for kids to see the full trajectory of what all is going on. But especially year one, this was important also for people to make the decision of some things that they wanted to see different about the program. It also gave everybody a chance to see some things that like, hey, this is something that matters and is a really big part of our narrative. We want this to endure and we want to amplify it. Then the team and staff collectively chose core values and characteristics that would define the program from here on out. This would ensure that it really was everyone's program and also help us with making future decisions. And then Chris and his staff designed some action items and rewards to really implement all of the above to make sure it all went work. And then the last thing we did, or one of the last things that we did, was Chris and I spent a lot of time coming up with a strategy about investing in relationships, peer-to-peer, peer-to-coach, okay? And we often used to get the question when we would give this talk in smaller crowds of like, why do I need to come up with a strategy for relationships? Shouldn't that just naturally happen? Well, we think it's important enough not only to have a productive program, but to also have one where its members feel loved, feel cared for, feel respected, and people genuinely like going to work. Now, that also tells on itself because stakeholders are clearly aware at the decisions leaders make, and they can sniff and tell when you're thinking long-term or short-term. And by having this detailed of a plan, it sent a clear signal that Chris and his staff, they weren't flipping a house. They were building a home, and there's a difference. Last thing that we all did was we spent time designing some threshold moments. And this goes back to what Chip and Dan Heath speak about in their book, Power of Moments. And what these basically are some strategically placed experiences that happen in a calendar year to make the program that much more special. And Chris is about to tell you of some of them.
So in the spring of 2018, we went all in with implementing this framework with Oxford football. We began with what we call our Charger for Life program. This is a year-round program where we work with our players on character development, leadership skills, habit tracking, a lot of other soft skills that we feel like will benefit them long after their football playing days are done. This really is the cornerstone of Oxford football. It's the one thing that we refuse to compromise on. As part of this program, we're able to create some moments throughout a calendar year that really help shape the experience that a member of our team has. We define a shared history, like Hunter mentioned. We define a shared set of values and habits for our program. We implement a one-week boot camp where we really emphasize these shared values and habits that we've collectively agreed upon. Another huge component of what we do as a part of this approach over the calendar year is our leadership council. Hunter and I meet weekly with this group of approximately 15 players from June through December. We've done book studies with this group of John Gordon's Training Camp, of Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. We also spend a great deal of time with this group on self-reflection and on finding intentional ways for them to pour into their teammates. Now, all of these things are really important, crucial parts of Oxford football, but my favorite moment each year is our senior retreat. Our senior retreat occurs at the end of our summer football workouts. To be invited on this trip means that you have reached the threshold of your senior football season at Oxford High School. We're able to take our seniors on an overnight trip. We do a lot of fishing, swimming, kickball, nukem, dodgeball, video games, a lot of good food. But my favorite moment every time from the senior retreat is our late night campfire. It's at this moment that our players are able to look at their teammates and tell them what being a Charger means to them. They're able to reflect on the highs and lows of their career thus far and let their peers know exactly where they stand heading into their senior season. Now, at a 20 or 30-year reunion, I don't know that players will remember specific scores from a game or maybe what we did at our typical Tuesday practice, but I'm really confident that they're going to remember that senior retreat and they're going to remember that late night campfire.
Now, we want to be honest here, okay? When we started doing this stuff, we went all in that spring of 2018. It wasn't like there was just this instant external buzz going on about the team throughout the community or the state. And that's fine. Those things have to be earned. Those things take time. But it was such a fun time to be around in that spring 2018 because you could sense a change happening. All of the things Chris just described were making a difference. It was incredible to watch and see. It was becoming more special to be a part of the program. It was becoming more special to wear the Charger jersey or be named a captain or be invited to be a part of the leadership council. Plain and simple, top to bottom, it was becoming more special to be a part of the program. Kids were more empathetic and confident. You saw more connections happening between peers and player to staff. It was a fun time. And then we saw some strides. Because some of those things are kind of tricky to measure in season, but there were some pretty spectacular ones that took place once we got it going. One of the first ones, the team posted the highest GPA in program history. Community service hours were up, and then we get to on-the-field production, right? And that's important. Wins were up. The team hosted its first ever 6A playoff game, and then its three closest games that were decided between 7 points or less, they won all three. Why is that important? Because those games, it gets tight. There's more pressure, and they have to rely on each other and their coaches, and they delivered. That season ended, and in a weird way, there wasn't like this somber ending to it. There was momentum that was carrying. And I love this graphic because it was such a perfect timing, culmination of events. Chris and his staff had done such a great job cultivating relationships with alumni to really make everybody feel like they had a role to play in the program. And it's coming into the 2019 season where it's the 50th year of Charger football. And I remember once it was in that off season and we're ready to start Charger for Life again, there was conviction. We're not changing a thing in the spring or the summer in regards to Charger for Life. We're going to build off of what we already have. We're going to watch more buy-in happen, and that's exactly what happened. It rolls all the way, spring, summer, same schedule, rolling into the fall season. And that 2019 season, that team goes 13-1, qualifies for the 6A state title game. And only 2 years earlier, they had missed the playoffs by one game. And now they're poised to win their first state championship in program history.
So soon after we qualified for the 2019 state championship game, we decided we wanted to make that game an experience our players would remember for the rest of their lives. We decided to make it an overnight trip, and we wanted to mimic a college football road game itinerary as closely as we possibly could. We wanted our players to know that they had accomplished something significant, and we wanted to set them up to play as well as they could possibly play. I honestly don't think the preparation for the game could have gone any better. Everyone was on time for everything, dressed in their team-issued travel gear. Everybody was in a great mindset. We finally arrive at kickoff that night, and suddenly nothing is going like we hoped it would go. We find ourselves headed into the locker room at halftime, down 21-3. We go about our very usual halftime routine. Our offensive coaches meet, our defensive coaches meet, make any necessary adjustments to our game plan. The coaches go to their position players, and they implement any changes that need to be made. And then comes the moment for me to address the entire team right before we go out for the second half. I've been asked about this moment many times over the last few years, and people expect to hear a story about an epic halftime speech that rallied the team to victory like you see in the movies. The truth is, in that 2 to 3 minutes, there's no speech in the world that can inspire a team if the groundwork hasn't been laid for months or even for years. It was very easy in that moment to look at the players and tell them they had nothing to fear because they were defined by so much more than a scoreboard. They had nothing to fear because I knew the preparation that they had done. They had nothing to fear because I knew the love that they had for each other. I told them I was confident that I knew exactly how they were going to respond to this situation because I'd seen them do it hundreds of times. And they responded in a huge way. We came from behind to win our first ever state championship, 31-21. Now, I have so many great memories from that night, but I think one of the memories that will stick with me the longest is seeing the former Oxford football players and coaches on the field celebrating that night. They had just as much ownership in that win as the players in uniform. I think that the full meaning of Charger for Life was on display that night.
I love that picture. So why does a football story matter? It matters because we need to be reminded about stories like this. We need to be reminded that institutions, when they're designed correctly, can make our communities so much better. We need to be reminded, too, you don't have to lie or cheat or manipulate people or abuse people to get the desired results that you're going after. This is a clear example of that we need to be reminding other young leaders about as well. And we're at a critical point right now because there has been a lot of abuse and manipulation from certain institutions, and our confidence in them is down. We continue to hover around 30-35% in the number of Americans that trust in institutions. And we get it. We're flawed human beings. People make mistakes. We don't lead correctly always. We don't follow correctly always. But we actually don't believe that's a good enough reason to get even more isolated or anti-team, if you will. We actually feel just the opposite, that we should double down on the lessons that we've learned by being a part of this team. That when institutions are carefully and collectively redesigned, they make our communities better. And when they are done correctly, they have long-lasting impact.
So why does this matter? This matters because all of us are better being a part of a team. This matters because being a part of a team is one of the greatest gifts and one of the greatest lessons you can give to a young person. We live in a world that so often is consumed with selfishness and with a desire for instant gratification. But being a part of a team reminds us that we don't always need to put ourselves first. Being a part of a team helps each of us reach our fullest potential, ultimately becoming the very best version of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank y'all.